Slavery is as old as civilization itself. In ancient Egypt, Greece, China, and Rome, people were enslaved for debts, war, or punishment. Yet these older systems were not always based on race. A person could sometimes regain their freedom or rise in society. Enslavement did not always pass from parent to child. What made the Atlantic slave trade different was its scale and cruelty. It was vast, systematic, and based on ideas of racial difference. Europeans treated Africans as property, not people, and made slavery hereditary. Children born to enslaved mothers were also enslaved, generation after generation. This system created new levels of brutality. Enslaved people had no rights and were often forced to work until they died. The Atlantic trade turned slavery into a business. Millions of lives were destroyed for profit. It was not just an old evil repeated, but a new horror invented. Understanding these differences is important. The Atlantic slave trade shaped the modern world. Its racism and violence left scars that are still felt today. The Atlantic slave trade began in the late 1400s. European countries like Portugal and Spain sailed to Africa and the Americas, driven by dreams of wealth. They wanted gold, spices, and new lands. But soon, they found another source of profit: human beings. As European colonies grew in the Americas, so did the need for workers. Sugar, tobacco, and later cotton plantations required huge numbers of laborers. Native American populations died from disease and violence. Europeans turned to Africa for slaves to fill this deadly gap. Slavery became central to the colonial economy. Sugar from the Caribbean and Brazil made huge fortunes for European traders and governments. Enslaved Africans became essential to the production of these crops. The trade was not just about labor, it was about profit, power, and control. The rise of the Atlantic slave trade was not accidental. It was planned, organized, and made possible by European technology, greed, and a growing belief in white supremacy. Enslaved Africans did not simply walk onto European ships. They were captured through violence, wars, and raids. African kingdoms and local rulers often played a role. Some allied with European traders, selling prisoners of war or rival groups to get guns, goods, or power. But the system caused chaos across West and Central Africa. Some leaders gained wealth, but many societies were torn apart. Families were broken. Entire villages disappeared. Kidnapping and fear became daily realities for millions. European demand for slaves encouraged more conflict. Raids and wars became common as the market grew. The region's stability was shattered. Some African leaders tried to resist or limit the trade, but the lure of European goods and weapons was strong. This period created a lasting trauma in Africa. The capture and sale of human beings left wounds that have not healed. It reshaped societies, destroyed cultures, and fueled cycles of violence that lasted for centuries. Along the coast of Africa, Europeans built forts to hold enslaved Africans. These forts, like Elmina Castle in Ghana or Gore Island of Senegal, became infamous. They were not just trading posts, they were prisons. Captured Africans were held in dark, crowded cells. Many were chained together in filth with little food or water. Disease was common, and many died before ever seeing a ship. The smell of fear and death filled these places. Guards brutalized captives, trying to prevent escape. Families were separated forever. Some captives threw themselves into the sea rather than face what lay ahead. The journey from the interior to the coast was already traumatic. These forts made it even worse. These buildings still stand today as painful reminders. Visiting them, one can almost hear the cries of those trapped inside. They are silent witnesses to a crime against humanity that changed the world. So, the Atlantic slave trade was actually part of a much bigger system called the triangular trade. Ships would leave Europe loaded up with things like guns, cloth, and alcohol. Then, they'd sail down to Africa and trade these goods for enslaved people. After that, they crossed the Atlantic to the Americas. In the Americas, the ships unloaded their human cargo and filled up with sugar, tobacco, cotton, and rum. These goods were then shipped back to Europe, closing the triangle. Every step of this journey made profits for traders, investors, and even governments. The whole system really fueled the growth of European cities and industries. Banking, insurance, shipbuilding, and manufacturing all got richer. The profits from this trade paid for palaces, cathedrals, and, honestly, a lot of new inventions. But you know, all this wealth was built on suffering. The economic success of the trade depended on terror, violence, and death. For the enslaved, the journey was just a nightmare with no escape. The Middle Passage was the name for the journey from Africa to the Americas. It was, honestly, a voyage of horror. Enslaved Africans were packed tightly into ships, sometimes lying chained together for weeks or even months at a time. Food was, scarce. Filthy conditions spread disease quickly. Dysentery, smallpox, and fever killed many before they could even reach land. It is estimated that about 15%, up to 2 million people, died during the crossing. The living suffered constant terror. Beatings and torture were common. Some jumped overboard, preferring death to slavery. The screams and moans of the dying filled the darkness below deck. Survivors arrived in the Americas broken, traumatized, and forever changed. The Middle Passage is remembered as one of the most deadly and shameful episodes in human history. When the ships reached the Americas, enslaved people faced new horrors. They were taken off the ships, often weak and sick, and paraded before buyers. Auctions treated people like cattle. Families were split without mercy. Buyers inspected teeth, muscles, and scars. The highest bidders chose first. Children were torn from mothers. Husbands lost wives. For the enslaved, it was the final loss of identity, name, and home. Once sold, people were given new names. Their African languages, religions, and traditions were banned. They were forced to work for masters who saw them as property, not people. The trauma of arrival haunted many for life. The violence of auction blocks and forced labor was the beginning of a new, harsh reality in the Americas. Most enslaved Africans ended up on plantations in Brazil and the Caribbean. Fewer than 5% were sent to North America. Life on plantations was brutal. Long hours in the fields, little food, and constant beatings were common. Slavery in the Americas was hereditary. Children born to enslaved mothers were considered slaves too. There was no hope for freedom, except for rare cases of escape or manumission. Families were always at risk of being separated by sale. Violence kept the system running. Overseers used whips, chains, and torture to force people to work. Many died young from exhaustion, disease, or punishment. Yet enslaved people found ways to survive. In their private moments, they sang, prayed, and remembered their ancestors. Their struggle for dignity and life was an act of courage every day. Enslaved people never accepted their fate quietly. They resisted in many ways. Some broke tools, slowed work, or ran away. Others fought back with open revolt. Famous uprisings like the Haitian Revolution showed the power of resistance. Culture survived too. African music, food, religion, and language mixed with local traditions. These influences shaped the Americas, giving birth to new cultures like jazz, samba, and Creole languages. The trade made huge profits for European traders, American plantation owners, and African elites. But abolition movements, led by brave black and white activists, slowly forced change. Britain outlawed the slave trade in 1807, the United States in 1808, and slavery itself was abolished in most places by the late 1800s. The legacy is deep. Over 12 million Africans were shipped across the Atlantic. At least 2 million died on the journey, and many more perished in Africa. The scars of slavery shape societies to this day. Racism, inequality, and the struggle for justice are all part of this history. Understanding the Atlantic slave trade is vital. Its echoes are heard in today's debates about race, memory, and justice. Only by facing this history honestly can we create a more equal and humane world.